Brian Judge, who is a certified public accountant, former hospital administrator, and lawyer for Stevens and Lee. Mike, we have two mics. We do that to keep it easy, so if you say, hey, Mike.
Balanced.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The mic on your right is a financial guy with Griffin Financial, and the mic on your left, I think you know, he's with Financial Solutions, which are financial planners. With that, we're going to let Joanne's going to go ahead and take your questions and do our presentation.
Thank you very much for inviting us to talk with you today. We want to be respectful of your time, so what we'd like to do in less than 30 minutes is to tell you a little bit about who we are and the consolidated firms that we represent, give you a brief analysis of what we've seen so far in terms of looking at Cedar Haven and what we've observed from the publicly available information, and then lastly talk about a process that you might consider if you do make a determination that you want to do something with respect to Cedar Haven going forward. In our materials, if you would just flip through, if you turn to page 4, that's just a caption of all of the logos of the firms that we represent that are all commonly owned, originally started by Stevens and Lee, the law firm, but now includes an investment bank and financial planners, as you heard Chip mention, which I think gives us an advantage when we do these kinds of transactions with organizations, because we really do have across our platform a lot of expertise that comes from different directions, and I think it can be most efficient for you because we don't have to go outside and talk with others in terms of getting some of the analytical information that needs to be done or analysis relative to the debt or other things. With that, I'll ask Mike Vinn to my right to talk about some of the preliminary analysis that we've seen from looking at Cedar Haven's financials.
When we looked at the strategic alternatives that the county may want to consider, there's really 3 prominent ones that we looked at, and a brief explanation on those 3 options are listed here on page 13. One, again, is a sale, and that could take many different shapes. All of these have many different iterations in each option. The second one is a lease of the facility and the operations, and the third is bringing in an outside management company to run the operations of the Cedar Haven nursing home. And I'll just kind of go from the bottom up here. On the operations, due to the historical performance of revenue and expenditures, with the expenditures outpacing the revenue by such a large margin for such a long time, the amount that we think in our analysis that they would be able to cut expenditures over the long term and lessen, yes, they would be able to probably lessen the subsidy to the county's general fund, but it would not eliminate the problem entirely. You would also still be left with all the liability of running a healthcare organization. Please feel free to jump in at any time. But you would be able to, that's basically just to try to cut expenditures. The second one is a lease. That would garner maybe some more benefit, i.e. lessening the subsidy from the general fund on a historical basis, but again, it would not eliminate the county's exposure and liability from running a healthcare organization. The third is a sale. We feel in our preliminary analysis, and I'll go into detail in some of the numbers in our preliminary observations in a minute, but we feel that that would eliminate, obviously, because you would be selling the nursing home. In that option, you would eliminate, obviously, the general fund transfers on an annual basis, and also be able to eliminate some, fully fund your pension for having to do with those employees. And again, we can go into more detail. The nursing home in a sale process would be worth approximately $12 to $15 million. That 12, and on the low end of that, the $12 million would be enough to defease all the general obligation debt currently outstanding that's allocated to the nursing home for their projects. That would have to come off first, just from a federal tax code perspective. Again, eliminate the annual transfers, provide over $11 million deposit to the portion of the employees that are allocated to the nursing home from the pension, and provide additional cash transfer back to the county's general fund. There's 3 other aspects that would go along, and these are just all information for your consideration. There's 3 things that we look at from a social demographic standpoint if you enter into a sale. one, what are going to happen to rates, two, what's going to happen to patient care, and three, what's going to happen to the employees. All of those social characteristics could be taken care of during this process as directed by the county. It will have an effect on, depending on what you choose, on the eventual price of that facility. However, all of those considerations can be accommodated during this process. So it doesn't have to be just about dollar amount. There's definitely other aspects that go into that, and it would be the best transaction as the county defines it.
Mike, if I could just jump
Yeah,
in too.
absolutely.
I mean, you might be asking yourselves, why would this be attractive to somebody else to buy if it's not as attractive to you to continue to operate? And I think one of the nice positions that you're in is that you're not the first out of the gate in terms of considering this. There have been a number of counties, which we'll show you later, that have done this already. If you think about historically, the statute says that the county has an obligation to care for the poor, where nobody else has that obligation. However, the statute predated the creation of the Medicaid program. So at the time that statute was enacted, there was nobody else. So if you didn't have the resources to pay for long-term care, there was no alternative, and so the counties were charged with that obligation. Well, then in 1965, the Medicaid program came along, and gradually over time, lots of other nursing homes have stepped into the position where they are also caring for the poor. And in fact, in Lebanon County, there are 12 total nursing homes, of which 11 do that same obligation that you do in caring for the poor. So what used to be a county-only obligation is now really covered by a government program that's available to everyone who qualifies. So I think that's why you've seen a lot of counties start to move in this direction, because, yes, Commissioner?
But my question is, if their Medicaid only pays a certain amount, and if their daily rate is much higher, they don't have to keep them, right?
No, that's not exactly true. A couple of facts. One is, if you are Medicaid certified by the Commonwealth, 100% of your beds have to be Medicaid certified. So you can't be a 100-bed nursing home and say only 50 are Medicaid certified. That's a regulation for you to get Medicaid certified at all. The other thing that might be interesting to think about is that almost 2/3 of every nursing home resident in the Commonwealth is paid for by Medicaid. So it's not a tiny little subsection of the population. It's way more than the majority of the population. And that's why, if you look at the statistics for all the other Lebanon County homes, homes in Lebanon County, sorry, you'll see that they have very high medical assistance populations, because that's who people end up getting paid for at the end of their life. They've spent their resources, or they've transferred their resources earlier in life. Once you take a Medicaid patient, you may not discharge them for other than a reason that is medical, that you don't have the ability to care for them anymore. And the Department of Health and the Department of Public Welfare pay enormous attention to that. And in my experience, it's very rare that a resident does get transferred out of a nursing home, because generally they don't need acute care, or they would have been in a hospital. And most nursing homes are obligated to care for patients that need to have, observation, because they may be wanderers. The only issue might be if you have severely demented patients who need to be in a locked unit. Not every nursing home has that, and so you could end up transferring a resident for that reason. But apart from that, you just don't see residents being transferred. It's not an issue of running out of money, because the home has already agreed to accept all of those residents and care for them. And I know of nursing homes that are 100% Medicaid that are doing very well financially and providing great care and getting great ratings from CMS and great resident satisfaction and family satisfaction, because it's a business that they're just really good at, and they know how to do it well.
It's not been my experience.
Oh.
But, I take your word for
Yeah.
it, but I've just observed some other transitions.
Yeah, I don't mean to say at all that everyone is, as fabulous as everyone else, but it is an industry that is largely being paid for by the medical assistance program, and so it's not unique to county homes any longer, and really hasn't been for some period of time. In fact, if all the homes in Lebanon County decided they didn't want to be Medicaid certified anymore, you could never fit all those residents into Cedar Haven, because it just wouldn't be possible.
I guess where I'm struggling with this, I'm really struggling. I'm a 4-term county commissioner, And 3 of the 4 times that I was elected, I heard my statewide association say, William Penn charged counties with taking care of the indigent, and that included the nursing homes. And all of a sudden, in this last training, those words were gone from the training. And it has troubled me, and I have not understood what changed. If this law has been in effect since 1965, what changed 2 years ago? No one has explained that to me.
Well, and I don't, honestly, the law didn't change. The county statutes haven't changed, and the Medicaid program has been in existence for that period of time. Maybe, and I'm just speculating because I don't know what caused the training to be different, maybe as counties began to face this decision of saying this is a business that we don't have particular expertise in, and we really think that it's something that someone else should take the responsibility for rather than the county government taking the responsibility for it. Maybe the training program realized that although the charge is still there, your job is to make sure that the poor are taken care of. You have the assurance of the medical assistance program to say, and you can also look to see that there are numerous homes, as I've said, in Lebanon County that do accept medical assistance, and you could make as part of your contract with whomever would then be responsible for Cedar Haven that they have to stay Medicaid certified. And practically speaking, they'd have to, because they could never ever, even as the residents were discharged, fill up Cedar Haven with private paying patients. There aren't enough of them.
Been over since, I believe, 2003. It's been approximately about $15.5 million total that has come out of the general fund directly to subsidize the operations of the nursing home. It's over to Mike to kind of walk through what we would propose if this is something you wanted to explore. The only way to truly value an asset, especially one that's important as this, is to run a very, very transparent and competitive process.
Correct. So the numbers that Mike was talking about before, the 12 million to 15 million, what that assumes is that if the county were to move forward with that type of transaction, that a controlled, competitive process would be run to determine who the actual buyer would be. And as Mike said earlier, our job is not just to get the highest price, but to get the best terms, however it is that the county defines it. And there are a lot of considerations for that. But to be clear, a key assumption in our analysis is that a competitive auction process is run, as opposed to a one-off negotiated deal with one party. As Mike said earlier, it's been our experience that in nursing homes in general, and we think Cedar Haven would be no different, that there would be a good amount of interest from different types of buyers. Not only entities who currently run nursing homes, but also possibly real estate investment trusts, as well as private equity-owned financial buyers, all of which would be fully vetted through the process in terms of their qualifications for actually running a nursing home, which is obviously key. In terms of our valuation, because the county nursing home is losing money, we could not value it based on a cash flow basis or an earnings basis. So the primary method that we use to value it, at least preliminarily, would be on a price per bed type valuation, which is pretty standard in the industry. And if you turn to the next slide, on slide 20, we think the range from what we have seen, and if you were to go to the next step, and if we were to be the party selected to help you with a transaction, we would certainly refine these numbers. But the range that we have on it right now is $37,500 per bed to $47,500 per bed. So when you take that times the number of beds, we have sort of what a gross sales price here would be, which is the 12 to 15 million. The first thing that you would have to do, if you were to elect to go this route, would be to pay off the debt of the nursing home, which we've calculated what you need to defease that, which is almost $211,000. The nursing home would keep the cash that they have on their balance sheet, since all transactions are sold on a debt-free, cash-free basis. And then you sort of get to, well, what are the rest of the proceeds going to be used for? And there's an infinite number of possibilities. We've presented one here, which would be to put a deposit down for the Employees Retirement Trust Fund, nursing home allocation, which we have about $11 million that would be going towards that use. And then in each of these scenarios, there's cash left over that would then be able to go back to the county's general fund, in addition to not having any more transfers come out of the general fund.
If I could just add, the one thing that is very valuable about Cedar Haven is the fact that you are Medicaid certified, because the Commonwealth has had a moratorium on new Medicare certifications of beds for longer than 10 years. I'm not exactly sure what year they started, and in fact they've been trying to decertify beds because they think that it's more appropriate for more people to be cared for in homes or in home-like settings rather than in institutional settings. So there are no new beds. If you build a nursing home, you can get it licensed by the Department of Health. You cannot get it certified by the Department of Public Welfare. And I even looked at approvals of new beds in some counties where they were really like pushing out the walls because they were so busy. And they've done very few. They've done 10, 12 here and there, but nothing of any size. So that gives you value because there are a lot of very good owners and operators of nursing care facilities that can do it effectively from an economic standpoint, but they can't build anymore. So for them to be able to acquire one definitely has a value, and that's what brings the per bed value that Mike is talking about.
Anybody know how many beds Franklin County's nursing home was?
Right, it was right around 290 or 300 beds.
No.
Was it higher than that?
No, it was less than that, fewer than that. I just talked to Bob.
Oh, did you?
He said 186, unless I got something wrong in the translation.
They may have decertified some, just as you did over the past number of years, in order to meet the occupancy criteria.
So we have other beds that have been decertified. We were at 360 something, and I think total capacity is around 400. So those don't have much value.
They don't,
Just
no,
space.
because they'll never give them back to you unless something dramatic happens, and I don't know what that is.
Right.
I mean, you raise an interesting point, though, about the value of the space, because the space is still there,
Right.
correct? So, somebody else may look at this and say, well, although the Commonwealth doesn't pay for assisted living or personal care, as an example, that may be something that we want to take some of the space and expand into. Or we may say we want to take some of the 4-bedded rooms and make them 2-bedded rooms so that there's more resident privacy and more amenities on a go-forward basis. So the real estate space, the building space, has attraction, but not the licensed beds.
But you haven't taken that into consideration in your analysis here. Right?
Correct.
So that could be additional value, and you're right, I just was looking, it is 170 some beds
Wow.
certified.
11 million.
And again, we just wanted to, again, there's a lot of considerations that would drive the value. Again, the considerations Mike was going over, such as employees and things like that. And again, much more detailed analysis could be done and would be done during this process. We wanted to show you that there is real value here preliminarily.
Aside from an economic perspective, we think that what we've laid out can be achieved through maintaining the availability of care for county residents. We think it could be achieved also by the assumption of any union employees and union contracts by a buyer. That's something that we could lay out in the process if that were the county's wishes. You lay that out up front so that that's a fact that's known to all of the buyers and they bid on that basis. It would bring in all likelihood, a deep-pocketed partner which has a lot of capital, which would allow them to maintain, the high standards of the nursing home in terms of the quality of care. And then there's also the potential that if a transaction were to be had, that there could possibly be an upgrade to the county's credit rating, which would then have an additional economic benefit to the county in terms of lowering their cost of borrowing.
Potentially increase the county's credit rating by eliminating transfers from the general fund. As Mike knows well, we missed out on a refunding opportunity because our credit rating went down primarily due to partly to the pension fund, but also it was mentioned by S&P that the transfers to the general fund. Does a lease have the same effect? If we were to lease the facility, would the credit rating potentially, I'm looking at either of you, I'm not sure which one.
Only if you would really eliminate, I mean, there's a two-pronged approach to a sale that a lease is just not going to give you. One is going to provide enough upfront cash to fund the pension
Right.
for the employees, and I know the county historically has not put in their total 100% of their ARC payments. That was one of the things that S&P cited. The other one is we totally eliminate any potential future liabilities of the general fund having to subsidize any operations moving forward in a sale, where a lease would not. So, again, it may help, but again, you're not going to eliminate the total potential liability moving forward by doing a lease.
So obviously an injection of funding into the pension fund and elimination of the transfers would be an easy one for S&P. That would be an easy call for them. A lease would be.
You would think so, absolutely. Again, I can't speak for them,
Right,
but I mean,
right.
we would be pushing big time on that.
But a lease would be more of a, you'd really have to push the argument and hope that they see it.
Depending on how the lease comes out, again, and I don't want to, not be as direct and answer the question, it's just that you're not going to, again, $11 million into that pension is a huge boost, number one, that you wouldn't have in a lease. And two, again, you don't eliminate the potential liability moving forward that you would in a sale. So I think the argument would be, the likelihood would be less in a lease versus a sale.
Sure. We won't tell the S&P what you're saying.
Well, and I think the other sort of intangible point there is an operator, somebody that you would lease the facility to and expect them to run the business may not be as willing to make their own capital investments or program changes or other things as they would if they were the owner of the facility. I'm sure that they would want to do a good job. I'm not saying that they would not, but they wouldn't have the same incentive for investment. I would also suggest that as you think about this process, you may want to talk with some of your fellow commissioners in counties that did this some years ago, because my understanding of the way that they feel, in some cases 6 or 7 years later, in some cases 3 or 4 years later, is a great across-the-board satisfaction. The residents are happy with the quality of care. In some cases, the quality of care, I know your quality of care rating is very high. In many cases, the quality of care improved, services were added, a number of the buyers have added much more in terms of short-term rehab and other kinds of services to be offered to residents of the county. And I just haven't heard anybody that is less than satisfied, including to Commissioner Litz's question about the fact that they're still accepting every medical assistance resident who clinically qualifies. So I've heard very, very high satisfaction from the counties that have taken this step.
How about Lackawanna and Cambria counties?
In terms of satisfaction,
In terms of their sales, I understood that they were within a year on a list that they were in jeopardy of losing their Medicaid certification because of poor conditions.
I'm not aware of that, but I certainly will look at that. I don't know Cambria, but I do know that Lackawanna had enormous problems pre-sale as well,
Yes,
too.
they
So
did.
some of that may have been residual, because it does take time to clean up a lot of the problems that have been identified through surveys. But I'll look and see what the
There were
specific issues
things
were.